we have a great thing. We don't usually have couch and chairs on the table here.
No, quick set change. We're excited about today because we've got some dear friends of ours that are going to be sharing with us. We've been in a series this last month on love, on relationships, and sometimes the best thing as we talk about real life is to hear somebody's story. And so we're excited today. We're going to be able to hear friends of ours, their story. So can we invite Josh and Leah up?
Give it up for these friends.
Lots of you know them. They go to church here. They've been, how long have you guys lived here?
4 years.
4 years, okay. This is Josh and Leah.
So these two go way back with us. We were youth pastors actually, Josh is a little older than us. We won't talk about Leah, but let's talk about Josh.
So much older than us.
Josh is a little older than us.
He is so much older than us.
And so he was a youth pastor before we were, but then we are all youth pastors together.
Thank you.
Wait,
Thank
time
you
out.
very
Josh
much.
was a youth pastor, and I was like, I was an intern. I was like a freshman in college, and I went and served at your group one time.
You did.
That's how much younger I am.
Yes, you.
Just to be clear.
Spring
Okay,
chicken.
keep going. Sorry, keep going.
I'm not quite as younger as you than Marcia, but anyway, and so we were youth pastors together. We became friends. We found out we were doing a wedding in Hawaii. I mean, that's rough business, right? Someone asked us to perform their wedding. It was a family member of Marcia. So we went to Hawaii. We found out we were in Hawaii at the same time. And so we didn't really know them that well. We were like, let's just go to dinner in Hawaii. So we went to dinner, and that kind of...
And a movie. We got a movie, too.
We got a movie, too.
We also took surf lessons.
I did not.
Leah was smart, and she laid on the beach. And Josh, Kyle, and I took surf lessons, which I'll never do again.
Which
what
Kyle
happened,
and I think, learned to surf.
Yes, we did.
What happened was the three of us got in the ocean with
With a trainer, is that what you call it? Instructor.
an instructor who was cracking the whip.
I mean, she probably was, what, 70 years old?
She was an
been
older
living on
woman,
the island for years.
and she
been
was-
living off the island for a few years, I think.
She was adamant to teach us to surf perfectly, and I'm not exaggerating. We get into the ocean, and within a minute and a half,
She was kind of like...
Josh is gone, Kyle is gone, and it is me and the lady for 60 minutes.
Marcia's
and I-
trying to affirm
First of all-
the gift in her to teach surf instructions.
First of all, I didn't want to learn to surf. I did it to join the crowd. I'll never do that again. And B, we left, and I decided I liked him a little less, and I liked him a little less after abandoning me in the water with this mean lady. Okay. That was our Hawaii
enjoyed
story.
my day.
Yeah, Leah was having a blast. Okay. Anyway, so that was our first kind of vacation in Hawaii by accident together.
And then we just started hanging out and doing more and more together, became great friends, went to Mexico with our 2 newborn sons that didn't sleep too well.
It was a horrible trip with 2 babies.
So Devin was, I think, almost a year.
10 months.
10
Yeah.
months. And Colby was
3 months.
3 months old. And we're in Cancun. What were we thinking?
And they didn't sleep. Not a wink.
At all.
So we just lots of life that we've been to be blessed to spend with these 2. They were pastoring, youth pastoring, and then became senior pastors in a place called Pollock Pines. We eventually took them there for about 5 years. And we're going to kind of pick the story up somewhere in there. But just we want you to know that there was just a significant relationship that was here, a friendship in ministry pastors that was the foundation for a season that we want to talk about. And they want to share a little bit of their story. So,
Go for it.
Well, just to start off, just want to say thanks so much for having us. This is a little bit of a dream come true to be able to sit and share with my church, my home church, where I go to, where I spend every Sunday that I'm not gone at baseball or whatever else. But it really is a joy to be here. And Leah and I moved to Modesto 4 years ago. And just so you know, we've got things written down, about 5 pages of notes. I'm guessing we won't go over much of it, but we do have a couple of notes. So we're going to get started right, and then it'll go haywire. But we moved here 4 years ago from a small town called Pollock Pines, where we had pastored for just about 6 years. We almost made the 6-year mark. But and then we moved to Modesto because we were facing some crises in our life, and specifically crises with our marriage. And so that's what I'll let Leah pick up.
Sure. We were married originally in 1996.
And there's a picture of that.
Oh,
there it is.
Wow.
Isn't that beautiful?
Leah, you
Yeah.
look the same.
She does, doesn't she?
20 years later, right? Oh, wow. So we were married in 1996, and almost 20 years later, we found ourselves facing some very rough waters. We had been pastors at our church, as he said, for almost 6 years. And in that time, things were great. We have 2 boys. At that time, they were young, involved in their school, great friends. We loved our church. We loved our community.
We want them to be able to see a picture of that too.
Yeah,
There's some,
Oh.
just
some
cue
other-
them whenever you want a picture shown.
Go ahead and go to that next
no.
picture.
Oh,
There's
that's
us
the best
vacationing
piece.
together at Disneyland.
Look at.
There.
I was pregnant with
That-
Riley, I think.
What was I wearing?
No, Riley's there.
Who knows? Oh, Riley's there. Look at. I was no longer pregnant with Riley. There
Right,
she is.
and then let's hit the next picture really quick. There's me pastoring in Pollock Pines, and then we can hit the next picture where this was in India.
Oh, Kyle and Josh.
So
preaching
Marcia got
together.
really sick,
I thought I was gonna die in India. I caught some food, something terrible.
and so
Kyle and I were supposed to preach
we were
together.
supposed to tag team preach at.
Are you wearing the same shirt?
At am
He
I?
is.
I do have more shirts than this.
I feel like that commonly
It
happens for
happens to
you.
me.
It happens often.
Mark Buntain, great missionary, works with Mother Teresa. Mark and Hulda Buntain started an incredible ministry. Anyway, this was one of the churches that he began. And so Josh filled in for Marcia on the fly, okay? Just took her notes, and we preached, tag team preached. People responded.
It was a really great memory that I have.
God
That was fun.
moved. I was just, just so you know, that's real difficult to just fill in and take somebody else's notes. So anyway, so back to you.
And I think we got one more picture of us as a family. Yeah, there we
Okay.
go.
Yeah, so things were great. We were, as I said, we loved our church. Our church grew in that 6-year period about 600%.
Whoa,
Which is a lot.
600% growth.
Started at 20 people, went to 120, so, you know. But I was teaching in a public school in the area. Josh was involved in the community on school boards and on baseball boards, doing Little League stuff. We were very involved in our community up there, and it seemed like everything was fantastic.
So everything was good, but Josh, you said you came here because you were in crisis and needed a miracle. What was going on?
From the outside, things looked great. We had smiles on our faces, loving church, loving family, like that picture shows. In that picture, we were actually thinking to ourselves, I hate you. And you can't see it, but that was a horrible day, actually. And nobody knew. As a pastor's wife, you think, who can you talk to? Who do you tell that your marriage is in shambles? And so we were getting ready to face the hardest time of our entire life.
Crises that you face in marriage can be caused, but also crises you face in life can be caused by things that you create, or it can be caused by things that other people create around you. And what happened 4 years ago, just over 4 years ago, is that my wife found an email. And in that email, it outlined me having a relationship with a woman that a husband should not have. And when all the news came out, it would be found that I had been engaging in a 9-month-long extramarital affair with a woman that was not my wife. And in the course of the next few hours, next few days and weeks, our life would totally change. From being a respected pastor in a small community that everybody kind of knew and loved and went to a very broken, defeated person who didn't know what to do or where to go. My identity, my being a great husband and a great father and a great person was all out the window, and we moved here really facing the greatest crises of our lives for sure.
So it sounds like you lost a lot. Josh, you mentioned all that was going on in you. What about you, Leah? What did you feel like as all that kind of came to the surface?
Sure. It's hard to put into words because you just feel like you lose so much, and maybe some of you have faced an experience or a crisis like that where you feel like your life is just in shambles. You can't even recognize it anymore. I felt like I lost, obviously, my best friend, hope, my friends, we had to move to Modesto. It was kind of like the witness protection program almost in the middle of the night. It was like we were gone. Our boys didn't get to say goodbye to their friends, so they lost their friends. We had to move here not knowing anyone other than these two who lovingly took us into their home. My self-worth was completely shot. So, your whole life is just upside down.
This is one of the things that my heart goes out to both of you, but especially you, Leah, the story. Because, and part of it is because when you're pastoring, it's just a different set of circumstances in which you do your life. When there's a mistake made like this, it is almost always most appropriate for the person just to leave. And that's the benefit of being a part of a fellowship of churches. That's when somebody steps in and pastors people through this. And once this came out, the responsibility was no longer Josh's to pastor those people through it. It was somebody else's, and so they left. And there was also just a need in that moment to just distance oneself. If this even had a chance to work, and we'll talk more about it, like they had to just go. They had to get out of this environment and away from the people involved. And so just what I remember that day, I don't know if it later is mentioned, but I remember that day where I told the staff on a Monday morning or what have you, I've got to go, a friend of mine's in trouble, and I drove up to the district office in which Josh confessed to just some of our leaders in the Assembly of God. And then I went to lunch with he and a friend at Chevy's, and we talked, and then we drove up and packed up his office that day and went. And Leah, you were just off, out. You were out at that point, like, of course, hurting and all that. And we packed up the office and we came home and began to get things in order there. But like all that is what you describe. You hear this one day.
And so you said it initially, everything from the outside looked good. So now looking back 4 years later, what was it that brought you to this place? What caused this? What was going on that maybe nobody else could see, but now in hindsight you're like, this was happening in me?
I think there's a lot of things that contributed to the place where we found ourselves in at that point. And a lot of it, I mean, should we sit here for a couple of hours and just talk about where we ended up? But if I could boil it down to just a couple of things, or if we could, the first thing that I would say for me is that I began looking for the approval of man rather than the applause of God. And so I got my eyes off of God and what he wanted, and I began looking to man, not necessarily a man, but men, and what would gain me approval. And so it got my focus off in the wrong spot. So that's one thing that I would say.
Sure, and I think both of us at that particular point were so involved in community, me with my job and with the church, both of us with the church, that we were so busy with life and we felt like we had to do it all. We both took that on ourselves, and there just became a disconnect here, which caused more and more separation. And so I think both of us had somewhat of a part to play in that. We began to focus on my needs. He began to focus on his needs rather than each other's needs more than anything.
We said yes to a lot of really good things in our lives, but we didn't say yes to the best things. And I think that played a major role in it. Looking back on that day, it was a Tuesday. And that was a really hard day, but it was also a day that I remember that I was your pastor. Like, he worked really hard that day to save a friend, because I was bound. Like, we're talking about it, we're laughing up here, but I was really bound. And I didn't even know how sick I was, how broken I was. And when I went and I stood in front of the officials, they said, "When did you break it off with this woman?" And I said, "I haven't." Which they all sat up and they said, "Well, when are you going to?" And I said, "I don't know that I am." And so when we went to lunch that day, it wasn't like, okay, we're going to lunch and let's go pack an office. I had two friends, Kyle and another friend, Eric, who are both pastors. And both of them come from broken homes where their parents divorced. And they were pleading with me to leave the other woman and to stay faithful to my wife and try to do everything I could to make it work. I was in a very sick and broken place. And the other thing that I would just say that contributed on my part is that in 2 Samuel chapter 11, it's talking about the life of David, King David. And it says, in the spring where kings go off to war, David was on the rooftop. And I found myself in places I had never thought I'd be. I purposely would go places that kings were not supposed to be, where I was not supposed to be. And so it was putting myself in places that were wrong. And whether it's an affair or it's somebody in here who maybe has a dependency issue or whatever, we put ourselves in places where we could succumb to those temptations. And I definitely did that in my life because of the sickness and the brokenness in me. I allowed myself to be in places that I should not have been.
So everything comes out. I'm sure a shock to you to some extent. You end up in Modesto. Now what? Like, I mean, this is not just a change of location, really. This is like
Life.
Yeah, life. So how do you? What do you do? What's next? How do you deal with this life that's been dealt to you to some extent? Like, what do you do?
Yeah. Well, as some of you may know, there's no book, there's no manual that tells you step by step how to deal with this kind of situation or any huge crisis in your life. So we didn't really know what to do, but I never thought about divorce. I never said, "Oh, I'm leaving him." I was like, "Oh, we're gonna work this out. This is no problem. We're gonna move to Modesto. It's gonna be great." So at first, we really didn't handle it very well because we just kind of put a Band-Aid over it and said, "Oh, we're in a new city. Everything's gonna be great." We moved. It should be fine. It's all behind us. We obviously went to counseling. We did all that kind of stuff. We went to a 2-week-long intensive counseling, which was murderous. But it was kind of like we were just putting a Band-Aid on it and not fully healing each of us individually. And so that did not work out well for us.
Well, you moved here and you moved in with us.
Yeah.
So,
We did. Thank you very much for the spot.
So we had a 4-bedroom house, and you moved into our spare bedroom, and then the kids all. So you had 2 boys. We have 3 kids. So
Our boys shared a room. No, our kids all shared a room. Your boys got a room, and then you guys were in the guest bedroom. Yeah.
So it was a fun-filled house.
Our
for
kids loved it. Our kids thought this was
a never-ending slumber
the
party.
best. Yeah, they had friends over all day, every day.
We
This was
don't
the
want
best.
to move out ever.
That's right. They thought it was the best.
But there was, of course, a house to sell in Pollock Pines. This is pre-real estate days, and somehow the joke before us was that Josh and Leah somehow had houses in like different cities around, or different places that they'd moved, and so maybe that was a precursor to you being a realtor. But anyway, you had things to accomplish, so moving in with us was important, and also just a safe sanctuary for your boys. So you stayed with us for a matter of months, 3 or 4 months, yeah. But you're there, and I remember you going to this 2-week intensive counseling, and you were trying at that point, Leah, you were certainly trying to make things work. But we're entering the part of the story in which Josh had to decide whether he wanted to make things work, to be all in for Leah or to be half in and halfway. He was being truthful when he said he had not yet broken it off that day that everything came out. So pick it up right there, Josh, because this is the part that is, I think, most significant. A lot of people in their lives, they have things that are footholds or strongholds or just situations where they have a decision to make. Playing the middle ground was what Leah was not prepared for.
Yeah, so
You being half in and half out is what I'm trying to say.
Just to give you the real quick overview. So Monday, it's found out. Tuesday, Kyle helps me pack up my office and move it to our house. Tuesday night, I tell Leah I'm going to go break it off with the other woman. And then as I'm walking out the door, Leah says, just because you break it off with her doesn't mean I'm going to be here. Which, valid. But in me, the broken me, I went, maybe I don't want to break it off with the other woman. So instead of me going to the other woman and saying, it's over, I say, can we really do this? And she says, of course we can. Look at how much we've given up already. Of course we can. So I don't break it off with her. I go back to the house. Leah says, did you break it off? She says, I say no. And Leah packs a bag and leaves. That night, I could not sleep. And that was the night I wrestled with God. Yeah. And finally decided through the night.
You were sick, physically sick.
Physically sick, shaking. I mean, it was bad. And that night, I decided, I texted Kyle, I think at 1:30 in the morning, can I come move in with you? To which the response was, you or the family? And I said, the family.
I think it's because we would have said yes to the family.
Right, and no to me. And so, which, there's more to that story. And I went, and the next morning I did. I broke it off with the other woman. And
he called me that morning and said, we have to come now.
Because I knew that I couldn't stay there and be done with her. And so, I mean, I picked up the kids from school on Wednesday morning and drove out of town with their bikes and baseball gloves and a couple changes of clothes. And I stopped in at the school because you were teaching that day. I don't know how you were teaching, but you were teaching that day. And I said, I'm moving to Modesto. I'm taking the kids. And we had already talked about it, so it was good. And she says, I'll see you there. And we moved to Modesto that day. And Thursday morning, woke up and told the kids, we live here now. And if that had been it, we would have been good. But
there would have been lots to still work through, lots of healing needed, lots of root stuff.
But this is the middle ground that you're talking about, because we went to the intensive. We started going to counseling, but I had this tie that I began to reconnect with. And I had said goodbye to the other woman that day, but I went back to her again. And then Leah would find out, and she would be like, this is it. And so then I would break things off with the other woman, and Leah would take me back, and I just kept on causing her grief, to which finally Leah said, I can't do this anymore. And I did. I vacillated back and forth because I created an option in my life. And we do that in our lives. Like, we say, God, I want to be 100% for you, and then the next day we turn around and we dabble in this area of our life that we know is not good. And it might not be a glaring sin like mine was, but we're not 100% there. And so I did. I vacillated back and forth, and finally Leah said, enough is enough.
She had no choice but to divorce you. Those are the words you've used. And that was, January 13th?
January 13th, 16, our divorce was final.
And this was about 10 months after everything came out. It came out near Valentine's Day. In February. Stayed with us for 4 months or so, and then you moved out in the summer of 2015. 6 months, basically, and then at some point Leah said, we're done.
It was September of 15 that she said, that's it, I'm done, no more. And our divorce was final in January of 16. And go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and it was really done. I mean, there wasn't any going back for me, because he had proven that he was in the middle, and I didn't want that. I had to make that hard decision, which was his choice, basically. He gave me no choice. And I think it's important for people to hear that sometimes you have to make those hard choices and cut things off. That you don't have to stay in a broken situation because it's, quote, the right thing to do. I had people tell me, you need to be the one to stay, Leah. You need to be the one to be faithful. And I don't think that was wise. I mean, I'm not for divorce at all. But I think there's times that we have to cut things off and say, this is not right. You are not right. And so I had to make that hard choice. And that year, we were divorced then for a year and a half. And it was hard. It was painful. I didn't want that. I didn't want to make that choice, but I had to.
Look to see where we're headed next, but I just wanted to pause. They've kind of said it, but just a little pastoral moment. We believe that marriage is a covenant, not a contract, and it's forever. And that's how we treat it. There are a few reasons in the Bible, marital unfaithfulness being the most clear, the biggest one, that God says it's okay to get a divorce. And in our society today, there's tons and tons and tons of reasons why people would get a divorce. From very important things to them to pretty basic, like, why would this even be part of your rationale? And those are, in my opinion, reasons, and many of which are excuses. You know of folks, perhaps you've been at that place where you say, this was me. I want to be clear that in this situation, Leah had every reason in the world to biblically make the decision to divorce Josh. And this is a great moment to say a lot of the other reasons, including this one, God can still help people through. And he did. And that's what we're here. We're going to eventually get to the celebration part of the story. But there's a lot of reasons that I think are so much more minor and different than this situation, that this is where we want to help people. Like, they're the reasons before this affair and other reasons that no doubt this couple pushed through and said, no, we're going to stay married even though things aren't great between us in this area. We're going to stay married because it's the right thing to do. So I just wanted to have a pastoral moment here in the middle.
I mean, this was a horrible, horrible time in our lives. It was bad. When our divorce became final, I went back to the other woman again. And because I was being resolute that I was going to make it work. I was going to make it work. And poor Kyle and some other friends, they got to listen to text messages from me and voicemails about, oh, this is horrible, and oh, crisis, and oh, Leah, if she would just, and blah, blah, blah. And they had to live through this. This is a horrible time. I went back to the other woman, and I remember just in turmoil, constant turmoil. And finally I said to her, this is not right. This will never be right. And I broke things off with her and began a very lonely and long process. Choosing right is not easy. Leah and I were great friends. We're not the couple that would say we just fell out of love. No, we were great friends. We enjoy each other company. Every night we sit and we watch a show together, and we're close, and we hold hands, and this was all part of our lives. And to lose my best friend because of the choices that I made caused a great turmoil. And so we began our lives now separately. And I did become a real estate agent, and I think you got a picture of her buying her own house, and then with the boys in it, and me buying my own house. So there it is. We started our lives now separately, although she did allow me to be her real estate agent, so that was nice.
That was a business decision.
It was very
That's
nice.
right.
She wanted to put food on her kids' tables, so she used me. And I will say this, too, is that one of the things that we were committed to was co-parenting well. And so we did. We loved our kids. We both loved our kids. We supported one another. There was one night where Caden was having a really hard time about missing me, and Leah did a huge thing and said, Josh, Caden really misses you. I think it was Caden. Will you just come and lay with him for a minute? And so I drove from my house to her house, and I just got in bed with Caden, and I prayed with him, and I loved on him. But still in the midst of this, Leah wanted nothing to do with me. In fact, it was at this time she started dating. She dated a couple of different guys, or went on dates with a couple of different guys, and it looked like it was done, and I was in horrible pain.
So a typical day, I went to bed texting or talking with Josh and woke up to more texts and conversations with Josh, because God has created this man to be as social gets, and to do life with people, especially one woman, and he didn't have that. And at that moment, looking back on what he had for the 6 months that Leah was giving him a chance, and to see how he blew it, he was just completely beyond broken, that he had blown it, and he knew it. But then, like anybody would, he was dealing with the emotions of loss, and like, why won't she see that I'm serious? Now I'm serious.
Which I had been serious a few times before, so she had to believe
But
it.
I could see that there was a difference in Josh. So at that point, a year and a half, I think, a long journey of just saying, be faithful. I think faithfulness will prove that maybe God's not done yet. We'll see his faithfulness in the midst of you being faithful. Leah will see it. And of course, she, during that time, wanted nothing to do with Josh or the idea, and probably resented me saying, don't give up, Josh. But, it was funny
Well, in
because...
all fairness, you would say to Josh,
Yeah,
Josh, don't give up. You keep doing that. You be faithful. And then
Like,
you tell
shut
Leah,
up.
Leah, you hold strong. You don't give in. So
Like,
to
don't go
some
back to
extent,
him, Leah.
Don't feel bad for Josh. Like, you keep doing that. So on one hand, Kyle's trying to be a good friend to Josh and give him hope. And on the other hand, he's trying to encourage Leah, like, you're doing the right
I
thing.
remember one time, I think I told you, Leah, I said, look, I know it's hard for you to hear from Josh, because Josh would say, Kyle and Steve and Eric, they all think that you should come back to me. All these friends, and he'd have his defense, and I say, I know you're getting these words, and what I want you to, or these stories from Josh about everything we're saying or maybe saying, but I just want you to clearly hear me say, I think that you're doing the right thing and you're in the right place. I feel like I'm supposed to tell Josh to keep being faithful and not give up. It's like as a pastor, I wasn't saying two different, duplicitous advice. I was telling each of them what they needed to hear that was truthful, because that's what I felt like I was supposed to do. And each of those things lined up with the Bible. That's the good news. Good advice does. So, okay, I want to get through the story. So where are we at? Help me out.
Just really quick, I hated him a lot of the time. But I kept on going back, because in my brokenness, even through that year, I knew that my feelings were lying to me. And I had to hold to the truth that other people knew, rather than what I believed truth to be, because of the broken place that I found myself. The reality is, Kyle said, don't worry about what's going to happen later. Just make the next best decision. Oh, I hated that. And so, it was a struggle every day to make the next best decision. And I just hung on to the truth of these friends of mine that just encouraged me to do the right thing. And I want to make sure I'm not missing something, because I was broken, I was hurting, it was long. But
you stayed in church consistently.
I stayed in church the whole time.
And almost every week, I remember God was speaking to Josh a word through random things, like a missionary guest or what happened. But it was his daily bread, if you will, to get to the next day. During a season of difficulty, are you putting yourself in a place where God can give you that next thing that you need to make it to tomorrow? That was a very significant time.
So then what happened next was, all of a sudden, God, through a series of messages here at the church, through words and messages that people privately gave to me, began to do a work in me. And I don't know if you remember, but there was a missionary who came, and she talked about being raped on the mission field. And I stood in the back on that wall right there and listened to her begin to share. And what she said was, she read this note that she had received, and it said, I believe you've now fallen to the ground. There's nothing left of you to give. That's okay. Stay there. Allow the rains of the Holy Spirit to wash over you. Forget about who you were, who you are, or who you were hoping to be, and allow God to decide what he wants to resurrect from your fallen seed. And when she said those words, I was standing in the back, and you guys all know that I stood at the back and helped with the doors. I sunk to the ground and just began to weep, because I knew what God was asking me to do was to let go of Leah. Because up until that point, I tried to win Leah back with my words and my life. I'm going to prove it. I'm going to show you. I'm going to get you back. And the harder I tried, the more it repelled Leah from me. Truth. And what God was asking me to do was like Abraham, to go and sacrifice my firstborn son. I felt like God was asking me to lay Leah on the altar and let him decide what he would do. And I remember that Sunday morning walking up and just praying here and saying, God, I give you Leah. I want the best for her. And I believe you know what's best, not me. And so I went home, purposed in my mind that I was not going to try for Leah any longer. That was his job to take care of Leah. It wasn't mine anymore. And that was a turning point in my life.
And the cool miracle-working God that we serve, at the time I was going to the Riverbank campus, so I wasn't here. But that same missionary spoke there the next week. And I didn't know that he was bawling during the service. And at Riverbank that next week, I was bawling during the service. And God spoke to me. And it wasn't that he was coming back to my life, because that I would have said no. It was just that God was saying, hey, trust me. You can't trust man, people. You can't trust him. You don't have to. Trust me, and I have something for you. And just like him receiving a series of words from God over weeks, I was too at the same time. And mine was all about trust. Everywhere I went, whether it was at the Riverbank campus, whether it was my parents' church in Visalia, it was at a minor league baseball game where Lauren Daigle's song, I Will Trust in You, was blaring in the loudspeakers. Everywhere I went, people would send me messages on my phone that were about trusting God. And I was like, fine, I get it. What am I trusting you for? And I had no idea that that we were going to get back together. You're probably going to say it later, but every night when I would put the boys to bed, the boys would pray, and Devin would pray that we would get back together. And every night Leah would
try to be like, all right, God help the boys to sleep well. And she'd try running out of the room before Devin said anything. And he would yell, and I pray that mom and dad would get back together.
So
he has
God
your
was
volume. He has Josh's volume.
Go ahead.
That week after the missionary, I don't want to mention her by name because of protection, but that week that missionary spoke here, I received 7 different messages from people that said, God woke me up in the middle of the night, or I was praying for you and God gave me a vision. And then it was a Sunday morning, that next Sunday, when then that missionary was sharing at the Riverbank campus, that a guy came up to me after church and he says, God gave me a word for you. And we grabbed Marcia and he said, this is what God wants you to know, is that he's going to give you the desire of your heart. The thing you've been praying for a long time, he's going to make it happen. But your job is not to pursue it, confirming what God had spoken. And I know that some of you are here today, just like I was for a year and a half, and you walked into church and you thought to yourself, I need God. I need a word today from God because I need to make it. And God has a word for you. And he wants to share it with you, just like he did over the faithfulness of that year and a half that Leah and I were apart. He was faithful to continue to chase and woo me and build me. But it wasn't until I yielded fully to him that he was able to begin to do a miracle.
The thing that I repeated to Josh the most, that I think probably made him madder than anything else, was and the Lord just gave me this picture that until you're comfortable with the caverns of aloneness, He hated that. Caverns of aloneness, where only you and God are in that space, not you and Leah or you and anyone else. Until that moment, you won't find the health and wholeness that you need to build out of this thing. And I think that just a pause point before the story changes on Easter Sunday, we'll go to that point. But just some of you need to hear that word, that you have built your life around people or around a person, or you're looking for that hypothetical person. And it's not going to work out well until you let God inhabit the space that is first in your life. And you're comfortable being alone. If you have Him, then to not have Him at the center and put something else or someone else there. And that was the biggest journey from my seat that Josh had to go in. And I think Leah was watching subconsciously and consciously, waiting for it to be not about a person anymore. I think Josh being as crazy about her and making it work scared her in that season as much as being after anybody else, because she knew it was part of the same problem that led them in the direction of unhealth to begin with. And it wasn't until finally she saw Josh put God into the center, and it was only, like you said, you'd released. It was a game changer. And about Easter Sunday,
Well, on Easter, I'm doing my ushing thing, and I'm in the back, and I'm a little addicted to my cell phone. And so, I get, my phone vibrates. And for the first time in a year and a half, Leah sent me a text message that was not about the boys. I began to cry because on Resurrection Sunday, I saw God begin to breathe life into a relationship that was broken. And
It had nothing to do with us.
nothing. It was just a joke that both of us would get that nobody else would. And she said, I just got to tell you, ha. And I was like, oh my gosh. And that day, we actually ended up talking about going and grabbing some Mexican food together. And again, I was being the coy, not saying anything, because my job is to not pursue her.
But he was jumping up and down.
But I was inside, I was like, I can't respond. I mean, I was like a little puppy, that's spinning in circles and running around, but trying not to respond because I wanted her to be in the lead. It wasn't my job to lead. God was in control.
So you guys dropped you call them hey, can the boys come hang out? Because we're going to go, we have to go talk or something like that.
and we were like,
Real
yes,
boy.
Sure.
bring them now, hurry. You want us to keep them all night? We're good.
so the boys come, and
I
The
dropped
boys
them off.
did not know we were going out.
so yeah, Josh drops the boys off. Our kids are all hanging out. You both come back to pick the boys up together, and this is what happens. We don't say a thing about it. We just, hi, you guys. Okay, ha, not a big deal. They leave. Leah, I think, in her car, and Josh in his, and Riley, my daughter, looks at me and says, were they on a date? Miss Leah looked really pretty. She must have been on a date. Did you see what she was wearing? This was date material outfit. And I smiled. I said, I don't know.
She's then I have no idea.
But then pretty quickly, I text Leah, Riley said you looked really pretty, like you were on a date, ?
So take us through this. You can use the notes however you want, but take us through the rest of the story.
So the rest of the story all of a sudden happens really fast because God all of a sudden is doing the work. And we're not. We're not making this happen. We're allowing God to do this to happen. And we went from Mexican food to then actually going on a date.
In which we walked to the restaurant, and I kept my purse in between us.
Because
so
she
he
would not let me hold her hand.
touch my hand.
And again, I'm trying to be cool, coy. And but I mean, just a couple of weeks, and we sat down with the boys on a Thursday night, and we said, "Hey guys, we want to talk to you. Mom and Dad are going to try to make our relationship work. We're going to start dating each other." To which Devin jumps up and grabs a box off of his dresser. And he pulls a piece of paper out, and he said, at preteens at our church in January, they asked us to write down prayers, things that we were praying for, and we committed to praying for them every day. And he said, the first thing I wrote down was for Grandpa to get a kidney. And you guys know Gordon's story. And he said, and on January 25th, he got a kidney. He said, the second thing I wrote down was for Mom and Dad to get back together again. And he looked at us and he said, God answered my prayers. And we bawled and we cried because God had answered my son's prayers and our prayers and the prayers of so many of our friends. And it was, seriously, it was like 2 weeks later, then this happened. If you'll play that video.
This is Leah's classroom.
I don't know what's
That's
going
Leah.
on.
Leah's a teacher at Somerset.
Oh, wait.
So the kids don't know what it's spelling yet.
They don't. They just have letters that they're putting on the board in order.
Oh, I know what it is! 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 Oh my God, I know what it is! I have an M. Oh my God! Everyone get your iPads out. Get your recording in. I'm getting oh my God.
Hey guys, you quiet for a second.
Okay.
This is Reeve. You are my joy. You are my love. 22 years ago, we were in Carmel, and I got on my knee and asked you to marry me. And we've had some great ups, and we've had a few downs. And today, with your great class standing around, I want to ask you if you will marry me again.
Come on.
And then just about a month and a half later, there's a picture of us at our wedding, to which we got to enjoy in some friends' backyard. By the way, pool party with tacos is a great way to do a wedding.
So that was June 30th, 2017. You were remarried. God has brought about an amazing reconciliation in your relationship, in your family, and it's a process. How do you keep walking in that reconciliation?
It's a daily process. It's not easy. There are some tough days. There are days we struggle with things, but we have to constantly remind ourselves why we're here. That we have to put our trust in God, that we are here because of a miracle. And so we constantly lay that down.
For me, it really began with a choice. And it's realizing and understanding that there's a best. And that God's way is my best, number one. And that Leah is my best. And so it's every day making a choice that I want to pursue best, which is God's plan and His desires for my life. And if I could just speak for a second, because when all this came out, one of the things I had to do was I had to sit in front of my parents and I had to tell them of my failure. And on February 21st, 4 years ago, I sat at a Sizzler restaurant across from my mom and dad, and they knew the crisis, they knew of the affair, but I sat with them and I outlined the gravity of it. And my dad, who has always been proud and loved his son, but here he's facing the greatest crises of his life and the biggest failure. My dad looked at me after I said everything that I had done, and he said, "Josh, you are my son, and it doesn't matter what you've done, and it doesn't matter anything what you will do. You are my son, and I will always be proud to be your father." And for me, that was something that was like echoing from the halls of heaven, that God says to each of us today, no matter what you've done or where you've been, or even no matter what you do, you are my child, and I love you, and I love you. Many of you haven't had the chance to have a dad say that to you, and I want you to hear the Lord say it to you today. But I also want to say something to you, dads. Can you say that to your kids? Can you use those words and allow them to echo from the very heart of God that you love them no matter what? You see, the three big takeaways, if I could be so bold to say, real quick, that through our story that we've learned is number one, in this guilt-ridden, all these things that you face, whether you're the offended or the offender, you're not alone. There's other people out there like you. Number two, I would say we have a hope, but our hope is not in one another. Our hope is in the Lord. And then the last thing, number three, really fast, is that our trust. We put our trust in a lot of stuff, but the only place that our trust belongs ultimately is in the Lord. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight." And that is where we ended up really finding our healing, was in him.
Here's how we want to wrap up today. First of all, many of you are married here today, and if you're like Marcia and I and most of us, there are some days that marriage looks good, and some days you're just like, man, we need help. And I just want to level the playing field a little bit, so that nobody feels like anybody that would ever even acknowledge that there's a problem is admitting to a problem of this scale or this scale. We're just all in this zone, okay? That's the point. And so we're an authentic and real place. And I just want to provide for a response today that is not worried about what people think, because the truth is they don't even know, and they don't need to know. It's between you and God, and of course your spouse, and probably some godly counsel. And so the point is, let's not worry about what people think, but I think today is a day to respond. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to kind of informally, if you will, dismiss the service in case there's some that need to go. But if you can stay for about 5-6 minutes, the band's going to lead us in a song. And we want to open up these altars, or maybe even you and your spouse can turn together at your seat and have a little altar there, just a moment to respond. Josh and Leah are going to be available over here if you'd like to talk or be prayed for by them. Maybe you just say, you know, we want our marriage to be prayed for by you guys. And again, for whatever reason, wherever you might find yourself, but let's just take a moment and let's respond. So I'm going to let you just sit, remain seated, or stand if you want and sing. The band's going to lead us, but let's put a period at the end of this by turning to God and giving him wherever we're at. And ultimately, what we're here to celebrate is that God is a God that makes a way where there doesn't seem to be any other way. If we will stay close to him, he will prove himself faithful. So would you close your eyes and bow your heads? Lord, we just take a moment to respond to you. We take a moment to put you at the center of our circumstance. Declare, God, that you are the one who makes a way where there doesn't seem to be anyway. In Jesus' name, let's just sing and respond together.